So I'm here with Ron Carmel of 2D Boy, and he's also a partner in the Indie Fund. And yesterday we've seen a lot of great games at the Independent Games Awards and at the IGF also. And actually 2 games that are funded by the Indie Fund were shown there.
Right. Far Away by Steph Thirion, who is a wonderful game creator, and also Dear Esther, which we're all very excited about as well, both because it's a wonderful game, but also because it was such a smash hit despite our worried expectations about how well it would be received by the public.
Mm-hmm. So it made quite a lot of hits throughout the first 5 hours or so.
Yeah, we funded Dear Esther with about $60-something thousand, and that amount was paid back within 6 hours of launch of the game.
Wow, that's a success,
Yeah.
certainly for both for the makers and for the system of the fund, right?
Yeah, I mean the fund is our goal is to help developers get and stay independent. So we hope that by working with developers, we fund one game and they make enough off of that game to keep funding themselves afterwards for future projects. That is definitely the case with Dear Esther.
So in terms of funding, do you only do the financial side, meaning to support them to get their game out and to get a little bit more of stuff maybe, or all the things they need to finish the game, or is there also another kind of support?
We provide whatever makes sense for a particular game and a particular developer. If we take Dear Esther, for example, Dan Pinchbeck already kind of has everything covered. He's experienced, he knows what he's doing, he's excellent at promotion, he understands the business side of things. So for him, what we really were providing were finishing funds for his game that was already well into development. For another team like Cube, which is the first Indie Fund game that was released, that team was fresh out of university and they didn't have the experience that Dan Pinchbeck has. So we provided funding for the game and we helped wherever we could. We tried to let the developer approach us with what they need help with. So we helped with creating connections with distribution channels, giving advice on business and on art and on design. Basically everything we can to help, we do. So
the Indie Fund is supporting the independent game scene for about 2 years now, something like that. So with which motivation was the fund set up? Is there any other kind of funding for indie games in America? Because in Europe, where I'm coming from, there are lots of funding possibilities for art games and things like that. So which side are you coming from?
I mean, we're a strange hybrid. In the U.S., there's hardly ever any kind of government funding for these kinds of projects. Most of the options are either to take friends and family money or to go with publishers. And while we're not a charity, we're putting our own money into Indie Fund, so we want to make sure that we don't lose money. Our primary objective is not to make money here. We all have other sources of income as primary sources of income, and the idea with Indie Fund is to find promising developers and help them set up a shop in a way that's sustainable so they can support themselves and keep making better and better and more amazing games. One of our criteria for selecting which developers and projects to work with is we want them to be unique or new or interesting or push the envelope in some way, and that's kind of what we focus on.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find those games, or are game makers finding you? How's the process working?
The process used to be that we had an open submission process and we would get a lot of submissions, but we found that the open process took up a lot of time for us, and we think created a lot of wasted time for developers who were putting a lot of time into preparing a pitch. But most of the games that were submitted were not appropriate for our purposes and for our fund. Cube, in fact, is the only game that we funded through the open submission process. So since then, we've closed it. We approached certain developers based on just we've heard of their game, or there was some recognition, or somebody told us. Sometimes we hear through friends or friends of friends about a particular game, and we talk to a developer. So we do more curation now on our own, as opposed to what we started out, which is just telling everybody to approach us.
Mm-hmm. So I think visibility is then a big aspect when the indie fund comes in. So you have a kind of security net that the game makers are already looking for their audience and maybe have found them, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's two elements to that. One is the fact that we've heard of them means they're already doing something right in terms of getting the message out there, and there's an audience that finds the game compelling. And there's a parallel to that in terms of our other requirement, which is that there's a playable prototype. That shows us that they have the ability to execute their vision, and it's not just a good idea. So by the time that we start speaking to them, they've already shown that they have a good idea, that they can execute it, and there's a playable prototype, and that they've managed to get some kind of recognition, notoriety, and get the word out about their project.
And once you kind of make the commitment to fund, how's the process going on then?
When we tell the developer that we're funding their project, we say that we approve the project for up to a particular amount, 50,000, 100,000, whatever it ends up being. We usually pay it out in two chunks, half at first, and then when that money is getting near depleted, then we give the other half. The developer is responsible for their own development cycle and budgeting. There are no milestones. They don't need to report back to us. Just kind of send us an email once a month to tell us what's going on and what's new. We're there, of course, to support the developer throughout the whole process if they have questions or problems, or they need, or we can help with introductions or anything like that. And when the game finally launches, then our terms are public, so they can be found on the internet. We're linking them through our blog, but the idea is that the investment is paid back first, then we take a percentage for a certain amount of time, and we also cap the amount of profit that we can make on each game, so that if a game is truly a runaway hit, we're not making millions of dollars off of it. It all stays with the developer.